Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this, our Western Conference preview, is Nick Martin and our old friend Tim Kalinowski from Snapback Sports. And gentlemen, we're getting close. This is the second of 3 season preview episodes. We are recording on September the 25th, which I think is Wednesday. I'm pretty sure it's still Wednesday. So anything that has happened between now and when this gets released a few days later, we do apologize for, but wanted to be transparent about that right off the bat. We're going to go team by team in the Western Conference. We will talk about the teams as much or as little as we need to, talk about any bets that we have correlated to those teams, and give out some other futures. Then at the end, I'll throw it to Tim to see if he's got anything else he wants to give out before we get out, because he didn't come on the East Conference preview or the awards. So if he's got anything there that he wants to toss out, he will be more than welcome to do so. Central Division first, Avalanche. Colorado Avalanche are the favorites, plus 210, basically co-favorites of the Stars, who are plus 230. Then it's the Nashville Predators, the trendy team of the summer, at plus 500. Winnipeg, plus 650. The Minnesota Wild, plus 750. Utah Hockey Club at 22-1. The St. Louis Blues right behind them, 23-1. Then the Chicago Blackhawks at 110-1. I said this on our other previews. I'm going to say it again. My general theme, what I'm working off of in this NHL season, is that the bottom of the league has gotten better. I don't think there is one team that's like in the beginning stages of a rebuild or a tank like we've seen with Chicago or San Jose or Anaheim or Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal. It's been a really long time since we haven't had like 2 or 3 true bottom feeders that are in the process of not just rebuilding but tearing things down before rebuilding. And I think that brings the floor of the league up. One of those teams is Chicago. Obviously, I think it's a little bit better in the offseason, but I do think it changes how you want to bet the league. And I do think it throws a little bit more chaos into what we can see in the West. But I do think, Nick, that Dallas and Colorado are clearly the 2 best teams in this division. And I think that they will end up separating themselves from the pack. So we can start with those 2.
Yeah, I definitely want to start with those 2. I thought for sure I'd end up liking the Stars this year because entering the summer, I think their outlook was as good as anyone's, given that they'd have full seasons from Stankoven and Maverick Bourque. All their key players are on the right side of the aging curve, but I don't really like what they did with their offseason signings. I think you look at the right side of their defensive core with the Dumba and Labushkin additions, and obviously they're still going to be good, but those, I think that they could struggle enough that I'm not jumping to get on anything Stars right now. I'd rather wait and see, especially given that they're pretty short. You could, even with as good as last season went, you could still get numbers around what they are right now around the trade deadline. So I'm kind of in that boat for them and Colorado, that no argument. They're obviously viewed as cup favorites, but not teams I'm rushing to bet right out of the gates.
Yeah, I mean, we see this all the time. Like you can get fair numbers at the top of the league throughout the entire season. I mean, I feel like maybe you guys just had me on here to come back and talk about Florida, 20-1 or whatever to win the cup, whatever we got in December or January. And I think that's kind of my example for these teams at the top of the league. I don't want to take Dallas or Colorado right now, have someone get injured, and be caught with my pants down. I'd rather actually buy on an injury situation depending on it. We had the Edmonton situation last year. I'm not rushing to the window for any of those teams at the top. Sorry, no fun, but
No, I'd agree. And you'll hear more about it on our awards preview, but I do like one of the Colorado goalies. I won't say which one, and you might be surprised by which one in the Vezina market. And I think it's correlated to them just having a really good season and him racking up the wins. So that's Dallas and Colorado. I don't really think there's too much more to get into with those 2 teams, but Nashville is going to be the team that I think ends up will go into opening night as the most, I don't want to say overhyped, but overrated in the betting market on a game-to-game basis. I think that their point total looks a little lofty. Good team, good coach. They obviously had a really good season last year. Then they have a splashy offseason getting Steven Stamkos. Jonathan Marchessault and Shea. And honestly, of those three, I think Marchessault is probably the only one that I'd be like, he makes them, he really provides a big boost. I don't know about the other ones. Stamkos is such a super specific player at this time in his career. You got to find the right fit for him. Who knows what Shea's going to be like outside of the environment that he's been in Carolina. The goaltending should still be good with Saros, but he wasn't his like elite self last year. Some good young players that have established themselves as good pros. Like there is a lot to like here, and saying a team isn't a good bet to go over 99.5 points doesn't mean you're saying they're bad. I just think everybody's kind of running away with the hype, and maybe it's just the people in it's just folks in like the mainstream media that are, and that's because they get excited about moves like that, and more astute bettors or punters aren't doing it. But I would just throw a lot of caution here, because I do think the fact that this division is more competitive also hurts the Predators quite a bit here, because teams like Utah, Winnipeg should still be solid. Like I said, Chicago will be better. It's going to be a little bit more of a race for that 3 and 4 spot than I think people will think with Nashville. Like you can't just write them in to the playoffs here, Nick.
Yeah, I fully agree. And even I think you can throw the Wild in that mix of teams that should be a little better, or at least could be a little closer to Nashville. I think all three, and maybe very specifically Marchessault and Stamkos, they're scary guys to talk shit about. But I do think that all three of them, in terms of actually winning hockey games, did less than people think last year. I think if you took away their name power, you take away, obviously Marchessault's only a full year removed from winning the Conn Smythe, but they both fell off last year. Maybe they'll come in motivated, and then Shea, I think the Shea signing is just bananas. I don't really think he's going to play up to that contract. So for me, it's a lot of flash. It's a ton of money, but I don't think they actually added that much in terms of like where they're being priced in the market. So I'm with you. I think betting them to go under 99.5 is good and a solid way to play it. When you look at this division, I think there could be, I think everyone, like even the Blues, I'm not lower on this year than last year necessarily. So I think they're going to be, it should be a lot more competitive than I think people are kind of expecting them to just cakewalk into the playoffs again.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Nick. When I saw that you were on this Nashville under, I was like, okay, finally someone's taken the opposite stance here. And I haven't really found the guts to quite do it myself, but excuse me, something I am looking at is this is the 5th oldest team in the NHL now. So you look at guys like Stamkos, obviously O'Reilly, Yossi, Saros, like this is a team that could very easily be battling the injury bug. Like it would be quite the miracle for them to all come out of here healthy. And I think even if you think that, look, they are getting overrated by the number, I'd almost take a flyer that there's no chance that they don't have injury problems and go under for that reason. So that's how I can more so convince myself of this. A lot of tread on the tires for a lot of guys in that lineup.
Yeah, and the other one too, I think people are really high. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say the other one, it seems like people are really high on Stamkos props. People are betting him to hit 40. And again, I'm fully prepared to wear this and saying this power play is going to be a smash power play. They had Philip Forsberg there last year. So like there's, right. I don't like, he can play the right side on the power play, but to me, it's still like, I don't necessarily know if I think for sure it's just like a lock to be like one of the league's best units there and that Stamkos is going to score 40, but who knows? Maybe he'll prove me wrong. He's obviously going to be really motivated with how things ended in Tampa.
That's definitely true. And I wonder if we just saw like that Nyquist O'Reilly kind of line they were really good last year, but are we expecting, and I know Gus Nyquist doesn't have to do as much now that he's got a little bit more help, but do we see the best out of someone like that as well? So I think a lot went right for Nashville, especially in that second half. The blue line too, it's like, yeah, Roman Josi is an absolute force and a Norris Trophy candidate, and someone whose name gets thrown out in our awards preview for sure. But I don't know if there's all that much behind him on the blue line that really excites me. Carrier's a good player. Shea, who knows how he's going to adjust. But the top four just doesn't jump out to me either. So I don't know. Yeah, there's just like it's a 99.5 point over under, and I think we're all looking the other way in a tough division. I don't think that's the saying that they're going to be bad. It's just saying I don't think the hype is worth.
Literally comes down to like a couple coin flip games against like Winnipeg and Minnesota, right? That 99.5 is really what that comes down to.
There's so many examples.
Let's talk about those Jets.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say there's so many examples of teams like Nashville and Vancouver last year where they're probably somewhere in between what they've done the last 2 years. Last year, everything went right. Makes it seem like they're a complete wagon. This year, maybe some things go wrong. All of a sudden, it could look a lot different. So I feel like that's always an important
And they cleared their over point total last year by 11.5 points. That's one of the higher on the scale of teams that cleared their point total. So, like you said, answer probably somewhere in the middle.
Right. That brings us to Winnipeg plus 650 to win the division. The Jets, I think, when you're listening to hockey shows, especially hockey betting shows, and their folks are trying to find like a Stanley Cup long shot. If like the prompt is you got to find somebody beyond, the top, 10 or so, and in the 20 to 50 or 20 to 1 and beyond. I think Winnipeg will be the one a lot of people go to. And I don't hate the idea of like investing in Winnipeg in that way. Because I think that they're more of a team that will be a pain to deal with in the Stanley Cup tournament rather than a team that is going to do what they did last year, over 100 points, challenge for the division. They're in first place. I think they were in first place 2 years in a row at the All-Star break in the Central against a really good Colorado team and a really good Dallas team. So like they've done enough to get the credit, I think, for to be in that mix like a Stanley Cup sleeper. But that would be the only way I would want to back them, is bet them to win the cup if you like them, because I don't think anything else really stands out to me with Winnipeg. Nick?
Yeah, I basically have nothing to add on with the Jets here. I see them kind of right about with the market. I think that last year's first round scares me a little bit. It just feels like it's going to be hard for them to match some of these other teams in the top of the West. So I kind of think the number's just about fair, in my opinion, and that I don't even know if they'll have a comparably dominant regular season. Hellebuck was just so good. So yeah, I don't know. Kind of just think the Jets will be right in the mix. Should be a playoff team for sure, but not much in terms of bets.
They're a team I want to back on a game-to-game basis, specifically as an underdog. They're, Leboff will get mad at me, but in the midst of NFL season here, it's like there's certain teams. It's like I like them as an underdog, not as a favorite. I think Winnipeg kind of profiles as a team that I'd want to bet as an underdog, and I think also losing Dylan on the back end is a big deal for them. So, say what you will, but that is a defensive core that's not beyond Morrissey. It's just doesn't do a whole lot for me. And I know Hellebuck can be a great eraser back there, but Dylan was kind of a force for them last year.
All right, so Winnipeg, not too much to go into. Looks about right to all of us. One team or one bet I do like here. It's one of my favorite markets to bet before the season starts. The Wooden Spoon market, the team to finish with the fewest points. 140 to 1 on the Minnesota Wild. I think it's worth it. There's very, very little chance that the Wild finish behind teams like San Jose or Chicago, Columbus, Philadelphia, etc. But there is, I think, a path to this going really, really wrong for Minnesota in what is their last year with the dead money from Suter and Parisi on their books. Look down the middl. Yeah, Joel Eriksson, great two-way center. But then it's like Ryan Hartman and a youngster Marco Rossi, Marat Kuznetsov. I'm sorry for mispronouncing that one. Boldy's already hurt. The goaltending could be a disaster if Philip Gustafsson doesn't bounce back, and they're not too thrilled with like going to Jesper Wallstedt if things are struggling. So then it's Fleury. The blue line, I know they've got Brock Faber and they got Jared Spurgeon, but Spurgeon's barely played a full season in a long time. Jonas Brodin's another solid guy, but like beyond them, it's not all that exciting either. So I just think there's really big blow up potential here for the Wild. And as I said, that floor kind of raised a little bit. So I don't think you're going to need to finish on like 60 points or below to be the worst team in the NHL this year. So I think the wooden spoon is closer in reach for these kind of teams than it has been in years past, when Chicago and San Jose, before that, like Philly, Detroit, etc., they were basically losing on purpose. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Wild. I don't think that they're very good, Nick.
Yeah, I can see the arguments there. I'm just right on line with the market and don't have too much to add here. If I was going to target the Wild in any fashion, I think I'd be going with long shots on Kaprizov to win the Hart or the Rocket. We talked about this on our awards show. He had quietly put together one of the league's absolute best seasons last year for a Minnesota team that nobody was covering and was not scoring for a while there. They were short a lot of guys. So I think that's the only angle that I'm kind of interested in here, is just targeting Kaprizov to have a real boom season and maybe to get the most out of Boldy. He put up 96 points in 75 games last year. And I feel like everyone loves to tout their guy who like did this and people didn't notice and didn't get talked about enough. But I think what Kaprizov did down the stretch last year was my example of that, and 46 goals. So he's quietly just been insanely productive. And I think, could be, if I was especially a Wild fan, that'd be my bet. Try to get your money in on Kaprizov to do something big.
Yeah, beyond Kaprizov and Faber, it's really like it's all the same player. So this is a team that like they cannot withstand an injury to one of those top guys, and you just make your way down the lineup. I mean, Leboff, you talk wooden spoon, I lean under here as well. I know a number like that doesn't interest you. It has to be 100-1 or better for you to get excited. But, guys like Zuccarello, I mean, if Boldy's already hurt, it seems very, very touchy. And this was a team that did get the injury bug last year. I'm not saying because 1 year it happened, it's going to happen again. I think that they are vulnerable, particularly more than some other teams would be. So definitely wouldn't like them as a little flutter to win the division at all. If you were like looking down the board, I would definitely stay away from that. And I would lean towards the under here, but still think Kaprizov is poised to have another big year. That guy, you could set your watch to that guy scoring 40 plus.
Yeah, I think a normal person with Mike's viewpoints would be arguing to miss the playoffs at like plus 130 or whatever it is. So if you're listening to this and thinking, you agree with him, that could be another way to target it.
No fun way.
Yeah, that's let's save that stuff for Sundays in the fall in the no fun league. So down on the Wild. I also, one other thing I that's sneaky important to keep in mind with these teams like this is that if they're a seller at the deadline, I think they can make themselves a lot worse pretty quickly. Like, I know Zuccarello's got another year beyond this year, but he'd be someone who I could see being on the market. Few of their blue liners, like depth players like Johansson. So
Kaprizov,
that's just one other thing, because they need to. And then the Kaprizov news.
He's only got a year left after this, so that's not like an impossibility.
Right, exactly. Yep. So, like I said, there's just enough at 140-1 where you can see this thing just being Murphy's Law season for them. And if it is a Murphy's Law season, then they could really capitulate and go down the standings. And it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for a team like Minnesota to do that and win the lottery or something. That brings us to Utah. And yeah, they have been. Utah up next. And I said the Predators were the trendiest team among I would say like the media, perhaps. Utah is the only other team I could see kind of challenging them for that title. But there's a lot to like here. We liked this team last year quite a bit. Like we were talking about Andre Tourigny being a great Jack Adams bet at 100-1 because we thought they had some upside to make the playoffs. That didn't happen, but they had a good start to the season before things just really fell apart when all the news started to break about them not being in Arizona anymore, and it became a very very weird season for Utah. But they tick a lot of boxes here. They've got really good young skilled forwards, deep top six. I think the blue line obviously got better with Dursey in his second year, and then Sergachev coming in. I know Marino's hurt already, but even a guy like Ian Cole just providing some depth. So there's a lot to like here for Utah. I think this is a team I'm going to be monitoring on bigger prices as the season goes on. But Nick, you like them already right off the bat. One bet I did get, I like the Josh Doan Calder odds. That's the only one that I can think of that I'd be betting right now for Utah. But generally speaking, I just think the hype here is appropriate, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hype is appropriate. This was the first futures article that I wrote this summer, was on Utah to make the playoffs. It was plus 190 when I wrote it. I still think plus 170 is worthy of a bet. I think there's a lot to like about Utah. At times you could see it last year. It felt like we were almost thinking we were right until that 14-game losing streak, and then Arizona pretty much finished right where everyone expected them to be. But I still think they have all these young forwards that can take steps in the right direction. I think Logan Cooley can be better. I love Michelli. I think Dylan Gunther is a great guy to target in fantasy and could really pop off. And then Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz, still like them a lot as legit top liners. And I think you could have a solid goaltending tandem too. Ingram and Vejmelka, I think, has the upside to be a good 1A, 1B duo. It's obviously a bit of a gamble to see if we get the same thing or not out of Ingram. But I think most people expected Vejmelka to be a little sharper than he was last year too. I think they've got a good coach. And I think the underrated thing that, maybe some people are starting to talk about a little more is the fact that this team was being run like the Oakland Athletics last year. These guys are getting I think those little disadvantages, like you're staying in hotels further from the airport, you're doing second-rate traveling, you're getting worse catering, you're getting less skill coaching, whatever it is, all these things that they were cutting corners and trying to save some money when it was Arizona. Now it sounds like ownership's really trying to do the opposite. They're trying to make Utah become a place that players really want to play quickly. And I think that could be a bit of an underrated storyline. And it feels like it's going to go from a vibe that was a bit of a mess off the ice to a vibe that could be, the city's really excited about hockey and the players are really liking the situation. So I think there's something to be said for that could kind of provide a bit of a boost to everyone on the roster.
I mean, yeah, I locked in. What was it? Was it at like 50 at one point? Them to win the Central early spring last year. It was a long number, 40 maybe. I know I locked in a long number on them. It's just kind of adjusted. If you look last year, is a team whose season point total was in the low 70 range. Now it's 88.5 for their season point. So is it that much of an adjustment? Do we think? I'm a little cold on betting, the over at that point, but I think certainly, the playoff, we're going to ride this train again. We're still going to call them our Yotes. And, we felt similar about the team last year. So I think that is like the place to shop again is the playoff market. Like you mentioned, Nick, everything else seems to have been pretty much adjusted for.
Similar odds on St. Louis. I think that this seems just about right. I do wonder if there's some sneaky potential here on the Blues. They finished right around, they were not out of the playoff race last year. I think a lot of people thought that they just weren't really relevant for most of the year, but they were still good top six with some serious upside in Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich, Jake Neighbors could take a step. I think the bottom six is fine as well, with some new blood in there as well. Matthew Joseph, Dylan Holloway, Radek Faksa, and Texier from Columbus. It's just the blue line could be a disaster here with Parayko, Leddy, Broberg, Falk, and then a bottom line of Suter and Kessel and Perunovic behind them. The blue line is what scares me. Then we had the situation with Binnington last year where he kind of bounced back, and he's now being talked about as a potential Vezina sleeper, but you just don't know with Jordan Binnington season to season, game to game. So there are some days where I'm like, I think the Blues, I could see it. Like I could see how this team is gonna get there. And then there's other days where I'm like, like this team doesn't look compelling to me as a Stanley Cup playoff team at all. And that's how they're priced, Nick. So perhaps I'm just saying easy way to stay away from them.
Yeah, that is, I think, the same. I'm in the same boat. Their defensive play has been horrible the last couple of years, and I think the defensive core that's left, I just don't think it's going to be enough to negate that flaw. I still think this should be a pretty bad defensive team. And Binnington had a full-blown bounce back last year. He was unreal, but they were still only that good. And I think outside of, Broberg showed pretty well, I guess, in the playoffs, but that's like a small argument to point to about why this defense core can turn it around so greatly when we've seen these guys struggles 2 years in a row now. It's just been a point of concern that doesn't look like it's really been addressed to me. So for that reason, I think the Blues are appropriately priced as favored to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, that decor really scares you, Leboff. It really, really scares you. It's a lot of hoping when you look at that decor, health, finding their old selves, all of those things. I feel best about targeting just Robert Thomas in general. Over 25.5 goals is his line. I would bet that over. He had 26 last year. I think this guy's ready to take another step. Could easily see him being 30, 35 goal scorers. So that is the only place I'm going to shop on the St. Louis Blues.
All right, that gets us to the bottom of the division, at least from a projection standpoint. That's the Chicago Blackhawks, 110-1 to win the division. As I said at the top, there's a lot of reasons to believe that Chicago takes a pretty significant step forward this year, and is just not as a doormat for most teams besides the Islanders next year. And a lot of it is just Connor Bedard continuing to play better. Hopefully he plays a full season. But they also bolstered that top six. And we'll see how much Taylor Hall still has to give. Tyler Bertuzzi, that's fine as well. Teuvo Teravainen comes back. Down the middle, things are a little dicey. Then you've got a bottom six with Mikheyev and Foligno. Craig Smith, noted Islander killers in there. Athanasiou. The blue line, I actually think, is underrated. I'd expect, we all like Alex Vlasic. I think the secret's out on him. Who knows with what you still have left from guys like TJ Brody and Alec Martinez, but in sheltered roles away from for Brody, away from Toronto, could be a step forward. Kevin Korchinski in his second year, we'll see what he's got, and Connor Murphy's fine. And then the goaltending, Brossoit is already hurt, so that's an issue. But him and Mrazek for a team like this, it's a fine goaltending tandem. So I just think a tougher out is how I look at them, and a team that I won't be afraid to back at big prices at all, Nick, because I think there's quite a bit to like for this team compared to where they were last year. I've seen some people giving out maybe now is the time to bet Bedard as a long shot in Hart Trophy markets and stuff like that. I think that's a little crazy, but we could see him make that jump to point per game over a full season, 80 plus or whatever. But I think any other awards is a step too far here.
Yeah, I'm a little on that because I actually do like a chalky one with Bedard to score 40 at plus 260. I actually think is a pretty good bet. You look at what he was playing with last year on top of what should just be his natural progression. And that lineup, we talked about it a lot around March or February or whatever it was. If they weren't Chicago and they weren't a team that nobody was following at that point anyways, they were absolutely decimated, missing half of their full-time NHLers at some points. Even though most of those guys are borderline NHLers, it was still, you had a really bad unit up there. So even with just Teravainen and Taylor Hall potentially helping him out on the power play and at even strength, I still think he just has so much more help. Whereas some of those, he was just the only guy you had to key in on a team that was really having a hard time controlling play. So even what they've done, if they can still stay healthy, and he just seems like such a guy I want to bet on progressing year over year. So I do like Bedard to score 40. That is my bet involving the Hawks. And I definitely agree that this team probably should be significantly less pathetic and is not going to be not a team you want to fade on opening night when they're plus 200 in Winnipeg, as I look at this right now.
they won't be as pathetic, but they had 52 points last year. Their point total going into last season was 71.5. It's now 73.5. I just, to me, going from 52 to over, which would be 74, I don't think they got whatever that is, 10 wins, 20 points better, however you get there. I'm betting them under. Betting under. There's 74.5 out there. They can be pesky, but I just don't think it's to this level. I think we're getting a little out of control here. I'm rooting for Bedard. It's always fun when the Blackhawks are good, original 6 team, but I think this number is just a little too high for me.
Love the original 6 call for your dad.
Yeah, Timmy loves his
he'd be crying to hear that.
Yeah, I don't think it's I think you're probably right. You're asking them to do maybe a little bit too much. Jumping this far in the standings. One other thing I was thinking about here is, like, I'm starting to see sportsbooks posting like time on ice leaders for the season. Seth Jones is 12-1. I don't know if that's a terrible bet. I think this team will lean on him, and he loves playing those big minutes. But just take a look at those markets. I don't think that they're tons of value, but they're fun to look at. First time I've ever seen them. So thank you to the bookmakers. Always so generous, those bookmakers, putting up a new market.
I forget, did the analytics like Jones last year? I think they did, right?
It's hard to keep
he's he's the most polarizing advanced numbers guy. Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
But say they still put him on the ice,
Yeah. A bet I really like in that market, though, is Mo Seider at 150-1. I should have mentioned that on the Eastern preview, but I think he's someone to keep an eye on there. Anyways, that brings us a mention of Mo Seider, who plays in the Eastern Conference. Will segue us to the Pacific Division, where the Edmonton Oilers are the favorite at plus 120. The Vegas Golden Knights are second choice at plus 330. The Canucks are plus 430. The Kings are 5-1. Kraken 17. The Flames are 39-1. The Ducks are 130-1, and the Sharks are 150-1. I think this is a very fun division to bet, because I think everybody is going into the new NHL season with this in mind. The Metro Division, the Devils are back. It's going to be a 3-horse race between them and the Hurricanes and the Rangers. Maybe the Hurricanes step back, but I could also see the Islanders or the Capitals jumping up and causing a ruckus. It's going to be chaos. I think a lot of people think that about the Atlantic, that the teams at the top got worse. The teams at the bottom should hopefully take a step forward. Hard to call. Very hard to call. The Central, well, it's going to be a 2-horse race between Colorado and Dallas, most likely, but also there's Nashville there. Everyone likes Nashville. We like Utah to make a jump. Really hard to call. This division could be chaos. And everyone's talking about the Pacific as if you can write it in stone, and I just don't think that's the case at all, because I think, the Oilers are deserving of their status to be the clear runaway favorite, not just in the division, but to be the team with the highest points total, all that stuff. They are the team to beat in my mind. They should be the favorite in this season, going into the season. But I think the teams behind them are closer than they appear. And like Vegas as a second favorite, fine, go right ahead, give them all the credit in the world. The Canucks had a good year last year. A lot of things went right. Now they're dealing with some goaltending circus stuff. The Kings, God knows. So I just think there's a path to success here for someone in the bottom to be the complete surprise that we'll see every once in a while in the NHL. We'll get to that, but those are my overarching thoughts here. I don't have any interest in betting any Oilers stuff here, Nick, other than, look, I tip my cap to them. They should be the favorite. I think the number is way too short to bet a team. It's not going to this division's too good and deep to bet a team at plus 120 before season starts. If you want to bet the Oilers, I would completely bypass the division odds and go, President's Trophy or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I would do the same thing, and I'd say the same thing for the Cup. I just looked at what we got. The Oilers were 11-1 to win the Cup on January 18th last year. Obviously, that was after things went very badly, but I just think it's going to be hard for their number to get much shorter than this. Like, if they come out and play pretty close to expectations out of the gate, all of their prices will still be roughly the same. Like, I have a hard time believing they're going to come out after the deep run that they went on last year to Game 7. They got some guys dinged up. They had guys getting surgery after, as all these teams seem to do. And I think the goaltending tandem is, who knows if Pickard, it will even be that good again this season. I think that it's just, they're not going to roll through the regular season. Or I just don't see them absolutely dominating enough where I'm like, damn it, I didn't bet them at this short number right away. I didn't bet them to win this division right away. So I'm not trying to argue against them. I think they're a worthy cup favorite and at some point probably end up getting there. But it's just like for the NHL, it feels like the books have guarded against that pretty hard given the number.
Yeah, there's a goalie here I like in this market, in the Vezina market.
Another Detroit Red Wing to talk about here in the Pacific Division.
No, Edmonton to me, it's you summed it up perfectly. I don't want to touch it quite yet. They're deserving favorites, and I still worry about their goaltending with Skinner, but I don't really have any conviction on putting my money where my mouth is quite yet with this team.
They got better too. Like that, I think that the additions they made up front are
that second line could be a lot better.
And,
like I like the Arvidsson fit
exactly.
for sure.
So like
with Draisaitl, if he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
If there was a way to target like McDavid playing less potentially, like they really had to break glass in case of emergency. Last year with the way they started, right? It was always a big thing in Edmonton, right? I think this guy plays the last 6 minutes of the game. So if there was a way to get at that, like just slightly plays a little less because their team, especially forward wise, feels deeper. So I don't know if you saw time on ice totals leave off, but
yeah, I'll request a bet for you over under total amount of time on ice for McDavid or third period minutes.
Yes.
That the second favorite is Vegas. They're plus 330. I think this number looks spot on in my opinion. Like to me, Vegas is a team that has every chance to be the waiting in the weeds come playoff time, and be a really tough out at 18-1 to win the Stanley Cup of any team shorter than 20. Like I'd much rather bet Vegas, I think, than almost any other team in this range. Looking from Edmonton at 8-1 as the favorite, to Boston and Vegas and Nashville at 18-1. But I don't see them as the type of team that's going to have. I said this is famous last words because I said this a couple of years ago about the Boston Bruins, and I was like, just wait, you're going to get a better number than 20-1. They're not going to have a great start to the season. Everyone's hurt. We'll be able to get maybe 30 or 40-1 on the Bruins to win the Stanley Cup later in the year. That'll be a great bet when everyone's healthy. And then they went out and put up the best regular season in NHL history. But I think a similar strategy works here with Vegas, where you can wait. Like I don't see this team as built to have that 115 point regular season, and I would assume that this number is sticking around for quite a bit, or it gets longer if they are like the first or second wild card again. Because that's kind of how I view this team. Like they don't have the ceiling to, maybe even like the want. Like, is it even part of their strategy to like go out ahead and post 120 points, or is it to like let's just make sure we're hot at the right time? So yeah, maybe that's getting too sports psychologist on everyone, but I generally like Vegas as a Stanley Cup sleeper, but I think there's an opportunity here, Nick, to sit back and wait and get this number later.
Yeah, I don't mind the Knights here. They definitely aren't a team that I'd be saying to fade. I still think there's a ton of good stuff going on with them right now. I'm kind of just like indifferent, and we're about to get on the Canucks. That's the one that I think is a little more of a fade. I feel like people are a little low on Vegas after, the end of last season and the way the first round went. But I also think it's pretty easy to point out that first round was like a Western Conference final quality matchup that they happened to get bested in. I still think you could point to a lot of points of strength, and they had a lot of moving parts coming in and out of that. So I like Vegas. I think there's overall, I'm a little favorable to them, and pretty good chance that when we get to the playoffs, they're actually a team that we're talking about as someone who could win it.
Funny you mentioned the Bruins that year, Lieboff, because I totally feel like I totally feel the opposite. Like, I feel like Vegas could have a Bruins type season. Like, how many times we say the Bruins all Marchand's old, Bergeron's old. Like, this is a team that is kind of similar. And if they are healthy, which they should be to start, right? I don't think we're not quite ready for Stone to go on the IR yet. So I think this is because of all of the love to the other teams. I think you're exactly right in that Vegas is kind of waiting in the weeds here. I'm going to like them over 96.5 points in the regular season. They had 98 last year, despite, being one of the teams that was at the top of the list in terms of, games missed, in terms, the cumulative man games missed. I think this is a quiet little sleeper here. I'm looking at plus 450 to win the division. I played that. I played Cup 20-1. I like to at least take a bite on a team in that 20 range, that high teen range. And to me, it's Vegas. I think that just start losing that game 7 to Dallas. Elliot Friedman said it, and I couldn't agree more with him, because I wanted to say it today in the podcast and I had to steal his line. It was the best thing that could have happened to them. I think having rest for this team, and again, forgetting that was almost a Western Conference Finals type matchup. Right. I really, really, really like Vegas this year.
That brings us to Vancouver, third favorite, plus 430 to win the division. I think this looks right. I think you could make a solid argument that Vancouver is maybe a little underrated after the season that they proved to us last year, or you can come to me and say, hey, like, this is a team that had a lot go right. Now they're dealing with injuries in the back end, in goaltending with Demko. I like the Lankinen move. I like that they brought in guys like Daniel Sprong and DeBrusk and Heinen to provide even more scoring depth. But yeah, I think this just looks kind of right to me, Nick. I don't really have much else here. There's not much, player in terms of like player props or anything like that that I want to get behind. So just gonna leave the Vancouver Canucks for you guys.
Yeah, I'm slightly more on the fade train. Not enough so to bet, so I won't dwell too long. But I just think the Thatcher Demko situation sounds extremely concerning. At this point, they do have the goaltending depth to mitigate that a little bit, but you take them out of the picture, and I think the case that they're like a full-blown Cup contender becomes a lot tougher to make. I think the depth of the defense core is a bit of an issue, and I think we kind of saw all their forwards play more or less to the best of their abilities last season. So the way I view it is, we liked the Canucks last year. We were really favorable to them as a team that we thought could go over and was being underrated. And I'm looking at it like, I expect them to kind of be in the middle of the last 2 years. I think one of those was one of those seasons where everything went wrong. Last year, it felt like a ton of stuff went right. So I don't really have a lot here. I think that the one thing we throw out on the award show, Demko as one of the favorites to win the Vezina, is a horrific bet right now, given his status. And then the other one that I do like, I think watching to see how preseason keeps going, but Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Calder, over 100-1. I think if he ends up, he wasn't with Peterson last night, he was with Besser, but he put up some points and continues to look good. But who knows if he's even going to end up staying there or going to the AHL. But right now, he looks like one of the guys who could get the opportunity to pop off in that race.
We're now over a year into this Vancouver, bump that they saw last season, and I still can't figure this team out. I wanna. It's like a stock that you're just chasing your tail the whole time. It goes up, you sell down. They're a really difficult handicap for me. Even last year with Nashville in the playoffs, when Demko goes down, you feel like you had a beat on betting Nashville. The Seelovs kid, what the hell is he going to do? No, they still came through. So I am like, I'm going to try and make my money elsewhere as I watch what Vancouver looks like to start the season. I think it's too difficult for me. Team that I chase my tail on the whole time.
Yeah, and not to be like the shot percentage guy, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. They could easily end up being like the Kraken the year before, where the offense popped off. Everyone had excuses and reasons why it happened, and then the next year it dried up. I'm not saying it's going to dry up like the Kraken, and I get that they have some guys that are, a lot more skilled than anyone that Seattle really had. But I do think that you could see this offense come down to earth a little bit, and given the Demko situation too, that's a little concerning.
Right on. Let's keep this train moving down the Pacific Division. The Los Angeles Kings, they are 5-1 to win it. Another first round exit at the hand of the Oilers. I think a lot of people are envisioning that happening again because the way that this division is priced, once again, it's pretty clear to the market. Like, oh, it's the Oilers and the Knights and the Canucks fighting out for second, and then the Kings fighting it out maybe for third or fourth with whoever falls to third between those two teams. And as we'll get into later, I don't think it's as straightforward as that. I think Los Angeles is appropriately priced across the team markets, but I'll go deeper into this on the award show. I like Darcy Kemper quite a bit in the triple digits, 150 to 1 to win the Vezina. I'll leave that for the rest of the show for the awards, but that's how I'd bet the Kings. I would look at that. I think a lot of people are expecting a Quinton Byfield big season. I wish I could bet him to like finish 11th, bet over under like better than 11th in Hart Trophy voting, but can't do that, Nick. So I'll leave it at Kemper for the Kings.
Yeah, that's why you got to get in like 10 fantasy leagues, Mike, and then you just get a couple shares of Byfield. But
yeah, maybe one of my least favorite sport media speak is when folks refer to players like fantasy players, especially fantasy football shares. I got my shares. I got my Ben Roethlisberger shares. Like, I know it kills me. It makes me
buy, sell, or hold.
But yeah, I like the Kemper. I'm in complete agreement with you there. We talked about this on the awards. They're not going to play the 1-3-1 anymore. They're moving away from it. But I do still think that you look at the defense core, that should be a really good defense core. Probably still play a fairly defensive style and support Kemper really well. And, last season was actually his career outlier in terms of worst possible year. And you look at goalies that are actually good year after year after year, there's not many. So trying to make an argument in favor of a guy who had one bad season shouldn't be that hard. So yeah, I'm right with Mike on the Kemper. And other than that, I think probably another steady run to the playoffs this year for the Kings. And we'll see if they can actually make any noise when they get there. But I don't really have much else to add.
Not so fast for me. I like the Kings 2-1 to miss the playoffs. I have Kemper concerns, and I think that might be why he's 300-1 to win that award. I feel quite the opposite. I think this LA's kind of teetering here, and it is the stench of Pierre-Luc Dubois out of there. Yes, sure, it could be a bump, but I see it far closer to, being LA minus 150 to make the playoffs, not the number that's being dealt here. So I'm going to take them to miss the playoffs. I think it could be funky. And if you have other teams that you think you're high on, you have to have someone to notch down, and I land on LA there.
That brings us to Seattle, who have traded seasons where everything went wrong for them, then everything went right for them, and then everything kind of went wrong for them again. I do think they're maybe a little bit better than these odds suggest, as the clear fifth best team in the division at 17-1. I don't know if the gap is as wide as almost in both directions as the odds imply, but nothing too thrilling here. I've got much more interest in a team beyond them, Nick. So I'm happy to stay away from Seattle.
Yeah, I don't really want to dwell on them either. My only take, I think Beniers bounces back with a big year. I thought that they'd be a team maybe I'd like coming out of the offseason, but I think allocating so much of that money to Stevenson, and now the fact that they're probably going to give him a pretty huge role with how he's played, is just concerning to me. So I think you'd expect them to be better than last year, but don't really have a hot take one way or another. It feels like they're just kind of a wait and see how it goes team for me.
Stole my thunder, Nick. Beniers 20+ goals, looking at plus 115. I certainly think that he bounces back. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle between that first year and last year. And I think 20 is a good number for him. And you can even ladder it if you wanted to and go further than that. I think Seattle, we have to keep in mind, we talked about it all throughout last year. They got dealt just that brutal schedule to start the season, and they still rallied for 81 points. So Seattle is a team that I'm going to be a little I'll feel better stomach betting Seattle in some dog spots this season. And if you wanted to take a flyer on them for, and I guess make the playoffs isn't really a flyer, but if you do feel good about them, I wouldn't knock make the playoffs. I think Seattle could be poised for a bounce back here, and I love me some Brandon Montour. So having him on the back end, special place in my heart.
Yeah, don't blame me for that. That brings us to Calgary, team in Nick's backyard. They are 40-1 to win the division. I think that is even a little flattering, considering where this team's going. It's not just like the way the roster's set up right now, but also what I think the plan overall is in Calgary too, where they're going to do their best to just keep an eye on 2 or 3 years down the line. No idea what to expect out of this blue line, which the only 2 players that were there for significant, like in Calgary as regulars last year, were Rasmus Anderson and Mackenzie Weegar. The goaltending situation could be an absolute disaster with Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar, or who knows, maybe Wolf comes good. But there's just very little here that tells me that this is that Calgary is a clear cut above the next team we'll talk about, and we'll go into that team soon. But they're 16-1 to win the Wooden Spoon. I think a lot of people will look at that bet to go for it, but I like I said, I'm all tied up in Minnesota Wild at 151. I'd much rather bet that. But I do think that's going to be a popular play in a market that maybe, I don't know how many people bet into that market, but I don't imagine it's all that many. But I do think a lot of people will say that, Calgary is my dark horse here, Nick. And do you agree with that notion, or are you?
I fully do. They were out there 25-1 earlier in the summer is the only one I liked. I bet this team, and you guys have heard me say for sure, or a lot of times on the player props, like season-long player props, you got to feel like you have so much edge if you want to bet minus 115, right? Leave your money in there the whole year. You're only going to make so many of those bets. But I actually bet the Flames when they were minus 250 to miss the playoffs earlier in the summer, and I actually felt content enough with that to bet it. So I'm pretty low on Calgary. I think it's pretty realistic that they only have 2 NHLers that are above average on the back end with Weegar and Anderson. I think that the offensive core, it's hard for me to see how it's going to be that much better. I know a lot of people are kind of penciling in Huberdeau to bounce back year after year. I just don't quite see it. I think it's been 2 seasons here, and he's just not quite going to put it together. So I'm pretty low on the Flames altogether. And like you said, with the goaltending, I think it could really fall apart and be a big issue. So for me, they're a sell, and I still don't hate them at that number to finish dead last.
And you'll be in the building on opening night for winning a longest drive competition while wearing hockey gloves, which is the most Canadian summer thing I've ever heard in my life, Tim. So congrats to Nick. Enjoy the game. I don't know who the Flames are playing, but
yeah, the field was a little whittled, Mike, because it was rainy and windy that morning. So I don't know how many groups it ended up being out of, but I got a little bit more of an advantage than if it was a nice summer day.
They expected it to be nice in Calgary.
I guess
the summer is nice.
It's like 83 here today, actually.
Every Canadian city says, you should come here in the summer. And it's like, well, a lot of other places are nice in the summer too, I'm aligned with you guys on Calgary. I like them under their point total. Like you said, you don't want to tie up a ton of money in these, so I only pick about 5 or so to really bet. And Calgary was an auto under for me. Like you said, Leboff too, the direction that they seem to be, guiding this team towards, which is, some sort of a rebuild. And Wolf really could be Nick, this was your guy. And I do give you credit because you did kind of flip when he went to the NHL, and you're like, maybe he is just too small, barely 6 feet. And, it's like me saying I'm 6 feet, and this decor isn't going to really give him a whole lot of help either. So I think it could look real ugly in Calgary. And I think betting into that is, this is a great thing about the NHL. Like the word is out, Calgary is going to be bad, and you can still kind of get in on it, right? It's not like the number's completely dead.
So let's talk about the next team. This is, I think, the most interesting team in the division. I like them quite a bit. I think we're going to be betting them quite a bit as big underdogs to start until the secret's out and they turn into an absolute juggernaut. That's the Anaheim Ducks. They are triple digits to win the division, 130 to 1. I mean, I'm not going to bet that, but they're double digits to make the playoffs. I think that's absolutely worth the sprinkle. Nick talks about the Jack Adams market with Greg Cronin, who has the best Massachusetts accent you'll ever hear. Former Islanders assistant is Cronin. But it comes down to that this team is just really deeper than I think a lot of people expect. And if you're getting the natural progression from players like Mason McTavish and Leo Carlson, Cutter Gauthier as a rookie, then Troy Terry and Zegras having a bounce back, Terry still being good. I mean, and then the third line, like a third line, if you put this third line of Ryan Strome, Frank Vetrano, and Robbie Fabry on like a lot of other teams, you'd be like, yeah, it's a solid, third line for an NHL playoff team. And I know that's expecting a lot of things to go right for the guys ahead of them in the lineup chart that are young and a little more variance when you're dealing with players in that part of their career. But I think it could. And then, Nick, you can go into the back line. I think both of us are pretty high on this blue line as well, which is a similar theme, right? Like a couple of decent veterans that could stabilize and then some young players who should take a step forward. So, yeah, I think a lot to like about the Ducks and a lot of different ways to bet them.
Yeah, this could be our take that ends up just being idiotic for the year, but I think there is a lot to like about the Ducks. And I think, like you said, the defense core is the one thing when I look at it, I'm like, this could be a really sneaky good defense core because I really like Pavel Mintyukov. Radko Gudas, their new captain, was really solid last season. I like Jackson Lacombe, and I think there's still a lot to like with Dumoulin coming in. I know he had a bit of a down year last year. And then Zellweger. I think Zellweger, you could see him have a huge season and really be an above average defender. So for me, it's a lot less of a lock that this team is just going to be like a joke defensively like they have been. And then that also makes me a little more interested in a potential bounce back from Gibson. We've always been really hard on him. And I think for a lot of years, he was really overrated when his backup was essentially posting better numbers than him year after year. I think it got a little hard to just say this is the Ducks factor. And I do like Dostal, but I think Gibson, if the situation's a little better, I know a lot of those years he wanted out. Maybe if things turn around a little bit, this could be the year we see a bit of a bounce back from him. So I'm just looking at the Ducks as a team that I think has a lot more upside than their betting price. And for that reason, I think that, yeah, Greg Cronin to win the Jack Adams is our guy this year. This is our super long shot on our team that probably will end up being bad, but I like the case for the Ducks. And if they're at all good, like everyone's still so low, they're still always listed in that group with, the Blackhawks and the Sharks as the favored to pick top three. So I think doing anything, he's going to get so much credit. And I think that the Ducks, could really surprise some people. The more I look at it, I like this team.
No, it's surprising when you pull out that projected line chart and you're like, wow, this team, Frank Vetrano last year, 36 goals. He's projected to be on their third line, right? So just off that, I'll say I like him under 26 and a half goals this year. That was a career year for him. I think he'll be having less opportunities and it'll be going to the youngsters, but over their point total, 78.5. It was 68.5 last year. Granted, they had 59 points, but up two ticks. Like, to me, I think we see this team. The thing about Anaheim, they got to start well. It's because it'll be, oh shit, here we go again if they don't start well. So that's certainly a thing, and I think all you guys are bang on. This is an exciting one. I don't know, Lieboff. A little flyer on 130 to 1 to win the division. Come on, we talk about not wanting your money tied up. I would throw just whatever, $10, whatever, little pizza money. Why not?
I'm drawing the line at Cronin. You're Cronin. Just
yeah.
Okay, yeah. We all found different ways.
I know. I'll never laugh you off for that, Tim. I should have noted that during our Eastern preview, I was starting to build a 4-leg parlay with division winners. Started with the Devils, then I threw the Sabres, and there's a long shot. I'm going to play the Stars in that ticket as the third leg, and then Vegas as the division winner for the Pacific to give us a ticket of $867 7-1 on Vegas, New Jersey, Dallas, and Buffalo. But that is just about where the odds are for the San Jose Sharks to win the division. They are 151 to win the Pacific. They too should be a lot better than they were last year, and that's a Captain Obvious take, obviously, because they were the worst team in the league and were historically bad and were giving up 10 goals a night to start the season. They did have that massive comeback against the Islanders that one night that was perhaps rock bottom. Number one for the Islanders last season, in a season where they were a lot of rock bottoms, but
that game
stuff.
gave me a that game gave me a sore throat for a week, by the way, staying up to watch that nonsense.
They by bringing Tyler Toffoli, they of course Celebrini and Will Smith come in. They're both up high up the board on the Calder Trophy odds. The back line looks like it could be a little bit better with Jake Wallman and Cody Ceci. They're not gonna jump off the page, but they stabilize a little bit. And then the goaltending, who knows with Askarov and Blackwood? I got no idea what to expect out of players like that. Nick, I just generally think that this team will just be more competent and not an auto like throw them on the betting blacklist, and because they've gotten a little bit better. Like even like a guy like Ty Dellandrea and even Goudreau, like they just help maybe add like 1.5 points to the team season long.
I agree, but I mean, they're getting credit for that when you look at where they're priced compared to what they were last year. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm a little indifferent. They should be a lot more fun to watch this year with Celebrini and Will Smith and even Askarov. I mean, I'm not quite there on betting Askarov to win the Calder just because I think the team's still going to struggle so much defensively. But it'd be something to watch maybe if they were just a little bit better. I think I could get there on that. But aside from that, I don't really think I'm going to have a lot on the Sharks. Excited to watch them as a team, but feels like you're probably reaching to find much in the way of bets on these guys.
Yeah, I mean, Cody Ceci, when you first pair on the back end there, it's I think what you guys said, it's all pretty much baked in. There'll be more fun. There'll be plenty of chances to bet San Jose as a large dog as of a team playing a back-to-back from LA to San Jose. So I'll wait for that, then tie it up in the futures market.
Okay, that does it. That's the Western Conference done and dusted. Before we do get out, Tim, I did say if you have any other bets that you want to throw out that weren't in the West, go right ahead. Now's the time. Yeah,
did you? This stuck out to me as you were tasking me with getting on this. It was Linus Ullmark to lead the NHL in goalie wins. 60-1 was a number I saw, and I think that could be quite fun. It's his net. It's his net. Let me double check that it is indeed 60. Yeah. 50. Yeah. 50-1. Linus Ullmark lead the NHL in wins. It's his net.
I can get behind that. Yeah, it definitely is his net. And Nick and I were talking about the Senators having some serious upside, so I think that's a good way to get in on them for sure.
I knew not to come with anything shorter than that. So
yeah, I thought and nothing like the Atlanta Falcons. Who cares? The NFL stuff sucks, man. All right, cool. That does it for this Western Conference preview. As we already recorded an Eastern Conference preview that is in the feed. The awards preview is coming as well with Jay Kahn from Sirius XM NHL Radio. Then it's Nick and I back at it again for the opening days in Europe and beyond. So get ready for a lot more hockey talk. Thank you for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. The beginning of the season is huge for us. So the more ratings and subscribers, etc., the better for us. Makes us look good to our bosses. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our producer, Noah. Best of luck building your favorite division winner parlay. Try to top that 867-1. I don't think anyone can. For Nick and Tim, I'm Mike.